8 years since the economic crash, an event of such magnitude that it was supposed to herald in new ways of doing the state's business. And for a while it did. The two largest parties in the state at the subsequent election agreed to form a government and negotiated a programme for that government within 1 week. They worked together over 5 difficult years to ensure Ireland's economic recovery. And as the publication of the SPU today attests, have brought us to a place where we can, for the first time in 7 years, confidently plan for our future. The most recent election result was said to replace old politics with new politics. It did nothing of the sort. What we've witnessed over the last 60 days has been self-interest over national interest. Old politics at its very worst. The kind of politics that got us into the economic crash in the first place. The establishment of Irish Water was not conceived to be popular. As the Minister for the Environment said this afternoon, it had its origins in a Fianna Fáil commitment to the troika to establish such a utility. A commitment which waived our derogation from water charges under the Wastewater Directive. But it was also the right thing to do. We all know our water system and our wastewater treatment system is not fit for purpose and hasn't been for decades. And certainly, it's not fit for the challenges we now face in the 21st century as a modern first world economy, whose people are entitled to clean water and decent treatment and the protection of our groundwaters. Water has been historically underfunded. It doesn't have the same visibility as the factors that compete in my department for scarce funding. Schools, hospitals, houses, daycare centres, and so on. Who can envisage in a competition between new cancer wards or new children's facilities that sewage would ever come top of the list? And we all know that. It's gone on for decades. So the utility model addressed this issue by allowing Irish Water access to non-exchequer funds. That was the idea of it. Like the ESB, like Bord Gas, a commercial company that could access funds off the state's balance sheet and invest the billions we needed to bring our wastewater treatment and our water supply up to normal European standards. A successful market corporation test, not impossible, actually achievable. Eurostat said no, but our own CSO said yes. And in my experience, and I'm around quite a while, Cathaoirleach, as you know yourself, it's the first time that Eurostat has actually overruled the CSO, which is basically the Irish subset of the European statistical body. If we had got the okay from Eurostat, we'd have even more access to cheaper funding. And because of the improvements we set out this morning in the SPU, we can now borrow as a state at less than 1%. And state bodies, state companies like the ESB, share in that low interest rates because of Ireland's success. If what I read in the paper is true, water is now to compete once again with other pressing demands for funding. As I said, in a competition between a cancer ward and a sewage treatment plant. What's going to lose out? The treatment plant, the investment in our water systems has no prospect of being successful. It is understandable, Cathaoirleach, that the imposition of domestic charges following a period of very painful fiscal consolidation was going to be unpopular. The public, indeed, were fortunate that Fianna Fáil weren't in a position to proceed with their planned €400 household annual charge. It did take us some time to get the model right. We did act too swiftly because of the pressure on us from the troika. And I can attest firsthand to that, because I had to meet the troika every 3 months to go through our scorecard with them before they released the money to pay our pensions and our social welfare payments and our public sector pay bills. Every 3 months, we awaited their scrutiny and their oversight as we lost our domestic control over our own finances. But the charge we have in place, despite all the rhetoric, I listened to the calamitous imposition on ordinary people. God knows there's been calamitous impositions on people in the last number of years. Most egregiously, the loss of 300,000 jobs and the sending of 100,000 people abroad. That was calamitous. But bluntly, a charge of €3 a week on a household doesn't fit into that category. Nor am I wedded to the system. We can make further adjustments. We should allow households to have a generous allowance and charge only for water wasted or abused. But what is now being discussed is dishonest. If charging is abandoned now, it will be gone for good. And those who paid it, law-abiding citizens, whether they agreed with it or not, they accepted the law of the land, will be penalised for their loyalty. It's a poor lesson in a country that drove itself to the brink of viability a few short years ago by pursuing short-term opportunity over long-term planning. And it's no accident that this has been driven by the same party that was responsible for the economic catastrophe that this country has now crawled its way painfully out of. And if the lesson we should have learned from the economic crash is to think long-term and to reduce the temptation to court popularity at the cost of the nation's long-term needs, it's amazing how quickly we have unlearnt that lesson. And Deputy Martin, above all else in this House, knows that well. My colleague, Minister Coveney, told this House today, and I quote, that water charges under the draft agreement being put together by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, water charges would be put on hold. He knows the truth of that statement. Everybody in this House, Cathaoirleach, knows the truth of that statement. On hold means finished and abandoned. It's a policy that I know runs contrary to the views of every Fine Gael frontbencher. How do I know that? Because they told me so, trenchantly, for the last 5 years. It's been our policies as a government to do the right thing. It's what Michael Noonan and I guaranteed to each other on the first day of holding our seals of office. To do the right thing, even when it isn't the easy thing. Ceann Comhairle, an election shouldn't change that fundamental principle.